Hey, everybody, it's your girl Queen Chill Mode coming at you with my edition of the 2018 NBA playoff predictions. Oh, I'm so excited, I cannot wait. I've been watching a few of the other YouTubers' NBA playoff predictions, and so wanted to do my own. But I also wanted to let you guys know about an actual website in which you can go to actually enter to win I would want to say $1 million grand prize should you pick the NBA playoff brackets correctly. Now that website is going to be www.nba.com/playoffs slash bracket challenge slash hashtag brackets. Okay, so if you guys didn't get that, I'll leave that link below in the description. And also, just please be mindful that the deadline to get your predictions in is going to be Saturday at 12 noon Eastern Time. So for those of you who are in the Central Time Zone, that's going to be 11 o'clock in the morning. And for those of you out west, that's going to be 9 a.m. So all you need to do is just go to that website. You will be able to get your register for this bracket challenge as well as get those picks in. So I want to start off in the East first of all with the number one seed Toronto Raptors taking on the Washington Wizards. Just to tell of the tape, how these two teams matched up over the course of the regular season this year. They split the season series. All right. As far as injuries going into this game, there are no notable injuries, but there are some players nursing minor injuries, such as Otto Porter for Washington. John Wall, as you know, is still coming back from his knee surgery at this time. But there's no major injuries like in the Boston series. But as far as one worthy note, earlier today, Jody Meeks was suspended for 25 games due to performance-enhancing drugs. So this is Washington's backup two guard who backs up Bradley Beal. So he will not be available. However, I want to say they signed Ty Lawson. I don't know if it was today or a few days ago. But he's available to play with them in the playoffs, and he probably will be needed now that Jody Meeks has been suspended for 25 games and is eligible to play for however long Washington goes into this playoffs, and barring the Washington Wizards going all the way to the finals and winning, probably that suspension will more than likely roll into next season. This game will tip off Saturday, 5:30 Eastern Time. You can check the game out on ESPN. So now that we've got those formalities out of the way, I want to get into some basically series talk in terms of Washington wins if this happens, Toronto wins if this happens kind of thing, and then I'll lead you guys with my actual pick for this series. So starting off with the Washington Wizards being that they're the 8th seed, some things to look out for or things that could actually help them win the series is and that's going to be if Toronto returns to playoff Toronto mode. And what I mean by that is, for those of you who've been watching the NBA and following the NBA over the last few years in the playoffs, Toronto Raptors have struggled in the playoffs. The success that they've had in the regular season has not translated into playoff success. So if Toronto should revert back to their old selves, that's a plus for the Wizards, because that will give them an advantage to win. But as far as things that are going to be important in terms of gameplay, John Wall is going to have to be the best player in this series. No doubt about it, because he's that big of a player in terms of scoring, passing, and getting in the passing lanes. And he can disrupt Toronto's Raptors offense if he's on his game. And also another key component for the Wizards to win is going to be their bench play. Now, the Wizards are not a team that has a lot of depth, and Jody Meeks' suspension certainly didn't help a team that was already struggling with depth as one of his weaknesses as is. So they're going to need to get some key contributions from players like a Kelly Oubre, players like a Tim Frazier, you know, players that come off their bench. I can't recall the other point guard's names. I'm not Scatteranzi or something to that effect. I'm not sure I pronounced that right, but he's going to be a big piece or an important player in this series as well in terms of, um, Toronto has depth that Washington does not. So they're going to need to actually step up their game in this series and be very consistent if Washington has any hope of winning this series. Now, as far as things keys to Toronto winning the series, now Toronto had an entire, basically did they reinvented themselves, if you will, in that they went from a team that was more iso ball style of play last year to a team that now shares the ball. Um, and if they can continue to play that style of play, even when times get tough in this series, because like most playoff games, there will be adverse times that they'll face. If they can continue to play together, share the ball, and not revert back to their iso ball style that they've had in years past, that's going to be a big key for them. And as I mentioned before, as far as one of the things that's going to be key for Washington, but one of the major things that's also going to be key for Toronto, because Toronto actually has depth on their team, is their bench is going to have to continue to be consistent and effective in this series. So with that being said, I'm going to go with the Toronto Raptors winning this series in 6 games. Let's see here, 6 games. So that's going to give them a 4-2 series lead. So that's what I have for the first round matchup between the Toronto Raptors and the Washington Wizards. I have the Toronto Raptors winning 4-2. Moving on to the next series, which will take place between the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are the 4th seed, and the Indiana Pacers, who are the 5th seed. Now, this matchup pits. This is a misleading matchup, and what I mean by that is that the Indiana Pacers won this series 3-1 in the regular season. But one of the craziest thing about this year's schedule in the NBA was that the Indiana Pacers and the Cleveland Cavaliers played all 4 of their series games in the regular season against each other prior to Cleveland making those trades. Can you imagine that being done with a team that's in your same division before you even get to the midway mark of your actual season? Well, that's exactly what happened between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers. With that being said, this will be the first time the Indiana Pacers will have a look at the Cleveland Cavaliers with their roster since those trades were made. So I'm not one of those people that takes a look at regular season and who did what in the regular season and try to determine if that's going to be a factor to the team's success in the playoffs, because there's been many teams who have won season series in the regular season only to falter to that same team in the playoffs, and some lost in sweeps, so it wasn't even close in some of these cases. But I don't have Cleveland sweeping this series, but I will go over a few things about what I think are going to be important key points for each team. So let's get the formalities out of the way. As far as injuries are concerned with Cleveland, they have Rodney Hood, who missed the final 2 games of the regular season with an Achilles injury. He is, however, expected to return for the playoffs, so he's expected to play. He's not doubtful or anything like that. He's definitely expected to play, but that is something that you might want to be mindful of as this series goes on. This game will actually be a Sunday afternoon game. Tip-off will be at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 Central Time, and 12:30 West Coast Time. And you can check this game out on ABC. Now, as far as things of note that can be important to each team if they hope to advance in this series, starting out with the Pacers. Now, Cleveland is one of, if not the worst defensive team in the playoffs. Okay, they rank 29th in defense efficiency overall. I think the only team that was worse than Cleveland defensively may have been the Phoenix Suns. So of all the teams that are remaining in the playoffs, the Cleveland Cavaliers are the worst defensive team. So one of the things that the Pacers can do to take advantage of Cleveland's defensive weaknesses is to continue to play the fast pace that they played to exploit the Cleveland Cavaliers' poor defense. That's going to be key for them. They're going to need to exploit their defense because their defense is the weak link to their team. As far as the Cleveland Cavaliers, this has been a season of ebbs and flows for them, ups and downs. They have got to find some consistency in this series. Um, that is a must. Now, keep in mind, LeBron James has never lost a first round series. I did not know that. I looked that information up. I was not aware that he has never lost a first round series. And has always won game one. Wow, that's interesting. Well, as far as keys that I feel that that are going to be important to Cleveland, aside from their consistency, they're going to have to do a better job of playing defense. I mean, they're just going to have to figure it out. I'm not saying on the fly because that's just definitely not something they're going to be able to do on the fly, but they're going to have to just bunker down and want to play defense and want to stop teams. This team is capable of defending. They have players that can defend. They have length. They have athleticism. They have quickness. But it's just got to be something that they want to do. Defense is a 1-2 kind of thing. It's not something where because you're the tallest person on the court, you're going to be the best defender. That's never the case because not always the tallest player on the court is the best defender. So with this being said, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the Cleveland Cavaliers in this series. I think I'm going to have them winning it in 6. I think Indiana will give them a run for their money. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the Cleveland Cavaliers, defeating the Indiana Pacers 4-2 in the first round matchup. Moving on to the Philadelphia 76ers Miami Heat game. Now, this is one of those series that I am absolutely looking forward to seeing. Now, as far as injury report, as you all know, Joel Embiid is expected to miss the beginning of this series. There's no guarantee he's going to play for game 2, but he's certainly going to miss game 1. As far as players that are nursing injuries or are out for the series, you have Dion Waiters, who's already out for the season, so he will not be playing in any playoff game that the Miami Heat play in this year. Josh Richardson injured his knee against OKC Monday, but then again turned around and played 30-plus minutes against Toronto on Wednesday. While he's not listed as doubtful or out or anything like that, that is something you want to keep an eye on in this series as well, as they go up against the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this game will take place Saturday night on ESPN, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 Central, 5 p.m. West Coast Time. All right. Now, as far as the keys to winning this series that I feel are going to be important, Miami has to control the pace of this series. They have to force Philadelphia to play slow. They have to be physical with Philadelphia. That's going to be a big key for them. And they have to use their bench. You know, they have some good players that come off of Miami's bench. Those are going to be some keys to the Miami Heat winning this series against the Philadelphia 76ers should they win it. Now, as far as things that to look for in the Philadelphia side of things, they're going to have to carry the momentum that they've gained thus far in this season. They basically finished the season on a 16-game winning streak to get to the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference, and so they're gonna have to try to carry that momentum over to the playoffs. Philadelphia just so happens to be one of those pretty good defensive teams. They're actually 3rd best defense in the actual NBA this year, believe it or not. And that's going to be a big key for them. And another point that I want to point out with Miami before I move on to the next round, or not the next round, but I'm sorry, the next matchup in the first round in the Eastern Conference, is Miami has got to force Ben Simmons to shoot from the outside. They cannot allow this kid to dominate the paint in terms of him posting up or getting into the paint on drives. or anything like that. They have got to force him to be a shooter. And this is the same Miami team who had LeBron James a few years back, and Spurs forced LeBron to be a shooter. So I know they know the defensive sets that they could go to kind of put Ben Simmons in that same situation. So if they're able to do that, that's going to be something that that can aid Miami or give them an advantage in this series if they force Ben to be an actual scorer, but not an actual scorer from the painted area or on fast breaks or driving to the basket, but actually be a scorer from shooting from the outside. But having said all of that, I'm going to ride the wave with the 76ers, and I'm going to take them to win this series in 5 games. So I have them winning 4 games to 1. Moving on to Sunday's matchup at noon between the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. This is also, while there are quite a few injuries in this series on the Celtics side, I'm still looking forward to this series because I'm looking forward to seeing Giannis play. I want to see if he'll be able to put this team on his back and get them to that next level to help them advance to the next round. As far as injuries, as you know, Gordon Hayward is out for the season, as is Kyrie Irving and Daniel Theis. They're out for this season, so they're not playing in any games in the playoffs this year. Marcus Smart may be cleared to play by April 27, but there's no guarantee. I believe that's the next date that they're slated to evaluate him, and so that is the game. Excuse me, that's the date that they're looking at to kind of have him cleared to play. Now, this series, Game 4, I want to say it's going to be on April 22nd. So, depending on how this series is going, I don't think Boston can sweep them or anything like that. But hey, you never know. Depending on how this series is going, um, it may not be necessary, but I doubt it. But that's just a little tidbit I wanted to let you guys know is that on April 27th, they'll reevaluate Marcus Smart to determine if he'll be cleared to play in the playoffs this year. As far as keys to the win, as far as keys for Boston to win this series, it's going to be their defense. Without Kyrie Irving, obviously Gordon Hayward, and Marcus Smart to some degree, they've definitely struggled to score. Keys to this series for the Celtics is going to be their defense, and to me, Brad Stevens. I think Brad Stevens is one of the best coaches in the NBA, certainly one of the best young coaches in the NBA in terms of years that he's been in the league, and I think this is a series tailor-made for his mindset, his game playing, and everything like that. But coaches don't play on the court. Players do. And so the players that are going to need to take their game to another level if they want to see Boston advance are going to be their 2 young studs in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Um, you know what you're going to get from Al Horford game in and game out, and Al Horford has had some pretty good playoff games in his time. But those 2 young men are going to have to be consistent in this series. They're going to have to be their scorers to pick up some of that slack that has been left with Kyrie's injury. If Boston hopes to advance in this series. Now, moving on to the Bucks side of things, Giannis has to dominate this series. He, to me, is the best player in this series. I don't feel like there is a player on Boston's team that can stop him one-on-one. But Boston's team defense is great defense. But he has to find a way to dominate in this series. And the Bucks defense has to shut down Boston. Boston struggles to score as it is, so they certainly don't want to give Boston fast break points, offensive rebounds, or anything like that easy. They have to dominate this series defensively just as well if they're wanting to win. With that being said, I'm looking forward to this series because of the Giannis factor, and because it's just the playoffs overall. I'm gonna roll with. I'm actually going with Milwaukee. I guess you can consider it an upset, being that they're the lowest seed. But I think this is going to be one of those fun series. So I'll take the Bucks in 6. All right, so that'll do it for my Eastern Conference matchup. Let's move over to the west side of the bracket, and let's review the Houston Rockets Minnesota Timberwolves matchup. Now that is slated to take place, game one, I should say, scheduled to take place not Monday, Sunday at 8 p.m. And that game will air on, I want to say TNT. Yeah, that's going to be a TNT game. I believe TNT has the night games on Sunday. Um, as you know, the Houston Rockets swept the season series um, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Um, just a little quick injury report. Luke Bamamute, please forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong. He's dealing with a shoulder injury that was suffered a few games ago, and he's scheduled to miss the entire first round. So regardless of whether Houston sweeps, goes, Minnesota gets them to game 7 or whatever, he's not going to play in the first round at all. As far as the keys to success for the Minnesota Timberwolves, they have got to figure out a way to slow down James Harden and Chris Paul, and quite frankly, with their defense, good luck with that. Uh, as far as I'm concerned, because Minnesota is also one of those teams that is not very well, not a good defensive team. Their best defenders, of course, are Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson, and that's it. This defense is not on a string like Coach Thibodeau had with his players when they were in Chicago. This team struggles defensively. They struggle to play team defense. They struggle to play individual defense. They struggle. So with that being said, they just gotta hope and pray that the Rockets go ice cold from beyond the arc. Uh, Real talk. I mean, they just gotta hope they go ice cold from beyond the arc. Um, but one of the things that Minnesota is gonna also have to do is they're gonna have to um, they're gonna have to get Karl Anthony Towns involved more in their offense. This young man is a dynamic player. He can score in a variety of ways. And as I was watching that game, the play-in game that they had against the Denver Nuggets, they didn't get him the ball a great deal down the stretch. And as much as I love Taj Gibson for being a diehard Chicago Bulls fan, he'll forever have a special place in my heart. For his hard hat, lunch pail, you know, mentality, hard work mentality. I love that. But I was struggling to figure out why the Timberwolves were running pick and roll plays with Taj Gibson instead of Karl Anthony Towns. So my thing is with the Minnesota Timberwolves, hell, just try it. You never know. I mean, everybody's expecting you to lose anyway. I mean, you might as well just throw everything out there offensively to see what may happen and what may work. You never know. It could turn into something huge, something big. So they definitely got to get Karl Anthony Towns involved. And they have to find their consistency offensively. I mean, a player like Andrew Wiggins is too talented of a player for you not to even notice he's in the game most nights. Simply because I don't know why. I can't explain that. I mean, if you can, let me know. But he's definitely going to be an X factor because they're going to need all hands on deck if they have any hope of beating Houston. You're going to need Karl Anthony to do his thing. Jimmy Butler is coming back from a knee injury, so you don't really know how much he can give you in terms of scoring. You just missed a lot of time from the game. It's going to take some time to get your rhythm back. But those are going to be the keys that I feel for Minnesota, and they're going to somehow kind of figure out a way to play some kind of defense because this is not the team you want. This is not the team you want to play against if your defense is poor, because they will definitely exploit it. So the keys for Houston to win this series, they just got to play like they did all regular season. Between the shooters, the pick and rolls. And they surprisingly were one of the better defensive teams in the league this year. D'Antoni has never been mentioned with having great defensive teams, but he was able to get this team to play defense in ways that are no Mike D'Antoni team has ever played. They are actually a pretty good defensive team. So it's not as if Minnesota is playing an excellent offensive team that doesn't bother to play on the defensive side and it's going to be a shootout. No, Houston actually is playing pretty good defense this year. It's a collective unit. Capella, Clint Capella is going to be a big key to this game because he's going to be tasked with guarding Karl-Anthony Towns for the most part throughout this series, and he's got to put a body on him, make him take difficult shots, and make him play defense. Karl-Anthony Towns is not a great defender, um, and Capella is having a breakout year this season, so he's got to kind of make him play defense to kind of wear him down, so that when he does get on the offensive end, he's not able to do whatever he so desires. So those are the keys that I have for Houston to win. Just continue playing like they have already this season. Capella's going to be big in this series. He's got to be able to contain Cat as well as make him play defense when they're on the offensive end themselves. And and like I said earlier, exploit the Timberwolves' greatest weakness, which is their defense. So to recap, I'm going to go with Houston winning this series in 5 games. I'm going to call it a gentleman's sweep. I think Minnesota will muster up a pride game, and what I mean by that, they'll get back to one of them home games and just flat out like refuse to lose and win that game. But for the most part, I'm going to go with the Houston Rockets winning that series 4-1. Moving on to one of my favorite series that I'm absolutely looking forward to, that is the Oklahoma Thunder, or Oklahoma City Thunder, excuse me, honey, and the Utah Jazz. I am looking forward to this matchup because I am a huge Russell Westbrook fan, and I think this is going to be a pretty good matchup. This is a team that I think this was probably the worst matchup for OKC when you really think about it, because you have a player like a Rudy Gobert who is dominant in the paint defensively, and what is one of the things that Russell Westbrook does best? Getting that paint. So you got a guy like I'm sorry, wrong series. Gobert, who dominates in the paint on the defensive end and certainly would do everything he can to make sure Russell is not doing whatever he so desires in that paint. Now, as far as injuries, Andre Roberson is out for the season, so he will not be playing, nor will Thabo Sefolosha for the Jazz. Alex Abrines is day-to-day. He actually suffered a concussion, so there's never really a timetable for the return of somebody who's had a concussion. So just something to keep an eye on as the series goes on. And they'll play their game Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Central Eastern Time, 5:30 Central, and 3:30 West Coast Time on TNT. All right, so let's get into the actual fun part of this, analyzing this series. On the OKC side, Russell Westbrook has got to dominate, but not only dominate. I don't want to see the Russell Westbrook of last year where he seemed to try to want to do everything on his own. Russell, I love him as a player. I love his aggression. I love that you will get your money's worth when you go see Russell Westbrook play. This guy plays to win night in and night out, and that's what I love about him. But some things that he's going to need to do in this series is trust his teammates. He's got Paul George, although Carmelo is not the Carmelo that we're accustomed to seeing, and like we have over the years with the big-time scoring Carmelo. He is still a player that's capable of knocking down big shots. And I love the pick and roll that he has with Steven Adams. So he's got to trust his teammates a little bit more because he got some good teammates this year. I'm not saying he doesn't trust them, but I'm just saying I don't want to see Russell reverting to, okay, we're not getting it done, let me do it kind of mentality, because that only helps the Jazz stop the OKC Thunder, because they become a predictable offense at that point. And Utah is a great defensive team, especially with Gobert on the court. So you don't want to have that. So one of the keys for Oklahoma City to win this series is Russ got to dominate, but dominate under control. Paul George has got to play like the superstar that he is. He is an excellent player offensively and just as good defensively. And so this is an opportunity for him to reintroduce himself to the world as one of the better players in the league, because he came down the stretch of the season, struggled a little bit. So so he can actually redeem himself in this series. So he's definitely got to do it offensively and defensively. Another key to Oklahoma City winning this series is Steven Adams. He's going to have to keep Rudy Gobert out of the paint, be it off of rebounds, um, be it to keep him out of the paint, to open up the penetration for guys like Russell, for guys like Paul George, whatever the case may be. He's got to keep this man out of the paint. He can't allow him to get offensive rebounds to help aid the Jazz in winning. So he's got to keep a body on him at all times, to keep him from getting offensive rebounds as well as defensive rebounds. And he's going to need to keep him out of the paint in order for them to be successful. In order for the Jazz to win this series, Rudy Gobert has got to dominate the paint on both ends. He's got to be that rebounder that he is. He's got to be that enforcer that he is in the paint. And Donovan Mitchell is also going to be key in this series. He's the guy who's come from being just another rookie on their team to literally being the man on their team. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he handles the playoff pressure, because I can see Paul George just sticking him, and I'm looking forward to that. I want to see that matchup. I want to see if Donovan Mitchell, can handle that type of pressure of I'm being guarded by one of the best defensive players. And not that he would be starstruck by it or anything like that, but I'm just saying the playoff pressure and the stage is different from the regular season. There's a reason why the games slow down. And another key component is going to be the OKC Thunder have got to look to get out and run and get some easy baskets, because you don't want to allow the Jazz to set up their defense with a player like Rudy Gobert on their roster. So those are some of the keys that I feel are going to be important to this series. But I'm gonna go with OKC winning this series in our first 7-game series, y'all. I think this will go 7. At least I hope it does, because I hope it's going to be a great series. But I'm going to take OKC winning the series 4-3 to advance to the next round. In our next series in the Western Conference, we're going to have the Portland Trailblazers taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. I am looking forward to this game as well. This matchup pits two of the MVP, finalists. I don't know if they submitted that list of MVP candidates or MVP finalists, but you definitely have to have Antonio Davis and Damian Lillard at least in the conversation. Do I expect either of them to win? No, sir. No, ma'am. But I expect them to at least garner some votes, with the success that they've had. Damian Lillard has taken his game to a whole nother level. Anthony Davis has done the same when Boogie Cousins went down. So this is definitely going to be a fun matchup for me. And for most of us, big time basketball fans, we're all looking forward to this one. Now, obviously, just to get some homework out of the way, Mo Harkless had knee surgery and is doubtful for the start of this series. So he's not going to start the series. And of course, for the New Orleans Pelicans, DeMarcus Cousins, Alex Acentia, and Frank Jackson are all out for the season, with various season-ending injuries. This series will tip off Saturday night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 Central, and 7:30 West Coast Time on ESPN. All right, now let's get to the fun facts of this series. I'm going to start with the Pelicans. Keys to the Pelicans winning this series will be Jrue Holiday and Rajon Rondo, ability to limit Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Jrue Holiday is one of the most underrated players in this league. He is one of the best defensive point guards the league has. And Rajon Rondo, playoff Rajon is what I like to call him. Saw him do what he did for us as the Chicago Bulls team last year in the playoffs. And if he can be that same guy for the Pelicans in this series, they're going to be a tough out. I will say that. So it's going to be on Jrue Holiday and Rajon Rondo to limit the success of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Got to make them work for all their shots. And when they get back on the offensive end, it is a must that Holiday is aggressive offensively against Little or McCollum or whomever is guarding him to kind of keep them on their toes and kind of wear them out, if you will. I mean, if you're D'ing them up on the defensive end and then you're coming right back at them on the offensive end, and those two guys are going to be the guys that have got to score for their team to be successful, that can wear on you at some point. And when you factor in the intensity of the playoffs, all of that can wear on you. So those are going to be keys for the Pelicans winning. Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo's ability to limit their backcourt, Portland's backcourt, as well as be aggressive against their guards to make them work on both offense and defense. Another key to New Orleans winning the series is going to be consistency from the outside. Players like E'Twaun Thomas, Nico Mirotic, they're going to have to be consistent from the outside throughout this series to take some pressure off of Anthony Davis, and to open up the floor for Rajon Rondo to penetrate and dish. Open up the floor for Anthony Davis, so he's not having to fight through double and triple teams every time he touches the ball, because if they're not making their shots outside consistently, I can see Portland packing the paint, and they will be wise to do that. So those are some key things to look for the Pelicans as this series gets started. As far as the Blazers, what they're going to need to do is they got to keep a body on Anthony Davis and force him out of rhythm, because he is New Orleans' go-to player, and they run their offense through him, of course, which makes sense. So they have to do whatever they can to keep the pressure on him, keep a body on him, and force him out of rhythm, thus hoping that will force New Orleans out of rhythm overall. And the role players for Portland are going to be key. As I mentioned earlier, Mo Harkless is out of this series, or at least doubtful for the start of this series after having knee surgery. So players like Evan Turner, Nurkic, those guys are going to have to be key in this series. They're going to have to step up. Role players will have to step up and be a factor in this series if they're hoping Portland is going to advance, because you can't just rely on your two players in the backcourt against a team with a dominant player up front, like Anthony Davis, and expect to win. It's just not going to happen. So with that being said, I like Damian Lillard as a player. I enjoy watching him play, but I'm a bigger Anthony Davis fan, and I'm going to roll the dice and go with the Pelicans to win this series in 7. I know Portland can get loud and rowdy, their fan base, but it's the playoffs, man. There's nothing in life is guarantee in the playoffs. Even if you have home court advantage, there's no guarantee that you're going to win. Because if that's the case, we'll be talking about the Warriors winning 3 championships in a row instead of 2 out of the last 3 years. Okay, now moving on to the Warriors. Speaking of the Angels, they've taken on a familiar foe in the San Antonio Spurs. This series will tip off tomorrow, actually, at 2 p.m. on ABC. Players in terms of the injury report, we have Stephen Curry, as you know, who's going to be out for this series. Patrick McCall had a spinal contusion. He is expected to miss the first round as well. Kawhi Leonard, quad injury, expected to miss the entire series, unless some word comes down that he's going to go ahead and play. That is the word on the injury report street, is that Kawhi Leonard is out for this series. All right. So as far as keys to winning this series for the Golden State Warriors, they're going to need to play up to their potential offensively. And that's pretty much self-explanatory. You're going to need KD to play like KD, Klay to play like Klay. Draymond Green, is going to have to also be a factor, because San Antonio is going to try to make him be a actual scorer. So he's gonna need to take those shots when he has them, because he's now going to be a part of their big 3. So he has a versatile game as it is, but there have been many times in games where I've seen Draymond just pass up wide open shots. He's going to need to go ahead and take those shots in this series. I mean, I know that's probably what Pop is going to want them to do, but yeah, go ahead and take those shots. Shoot your shots, little brother, because at the end of the day, they're going to try to do everything they can to make Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson work for everything that they have. They're not going to look to give them anything easy. Um, should they decide to go small ball and play KD at the center, and then pop counter that, more than likely they're going to have LaMarcus Aldridge playing that. They're going to go at him defensively, you know, get him in the paint. I mean, Kevin's a long player, but Kevin's not a big player in terms of size. And no, banging in the paint can wear you out. So they're gonna do everything they can to try to make the series tough for Kevin Durant. So when you got your shots like a Draymond Green getting open shots, take those shots. So that's gonna be one of the keys. Is they're just gonna need to play up to their offensive potential, as far as I'm concerned. And then they're basically gonna need to force the San Antonio Spurs into scoring droughts. The Spurs are struggling mightily to score. They are, they were able to make the playoffs this year, but scoring has been a struggle for them. And if they can force the Spurs into long scoring droughts, like they have in some of the games that I've seen them play thus far this year, where it would seem like it would be a back and forth game between the two teams, and then all of a sudden San Antonio would go into a scoring drought, and the next thing you know, the game is pretty much over. So that's one of the things that I feel is going to be important for the Warriors if they hope to advance to the next round against the Spurs. As far as key points for the San Antonio Spurs, Coach Popovich is going to need to just put on a coaching clinic. I mean, he's basically got to outcoach Steve Kerr in every facet of this game if his team even has any hope of trying to win this series. And the LaMarcus Aldridge is going to have to look like the LaMarcus Aldridge that he looked like when they took on Houston a few years ago when he was in Portland, and he dominated that series. I mean, he flat out dominated the Rockets. It wasn't even close. He's going to have to be that kind of. He's going to have to be that LaMarcus Aldridge again if San Antonio has any hope of winning this series. But with all that being said, I'm going to go with the Golden State Warriors winning the series. I'm going to say 6 or less. And I know that's a crazy way to put it, but I mean, the Spurs are still a team with pride. They're still a team that has players who are battle tested. And I feel like that in itself will be enough to get them at least 2 games. So I can see this series going as long as 6 games, but I wouldn't honestly be surprised if it was 1-5 or 4. It wouldn't stun me. But I'm gonna go ahead and go with 6. Now moving on to the next round of the playoffs, which will be round 2. I have Houston coming out against Minnesota and Oklahoma City going to the next round against the Jazz. I'm gonna take the Houston Rockets to win this series. I'll say 4 games to 2. I'll give it a 6-game series. Okay, so moving on to the second semifinal between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Golden State Warriors. Hopefully, by the time this series gets underway, Stephen Curry will be back on the court playing. But I think this is going to be where the buck stops for the Pelicans. No pun intended. I do not have them sweeping this series. I will give them 1 game, maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and push that over. So we will have Golden State and Houston, the matchup we all want to see. At least I do. I can't speak for the rest of the world. We all want to see in the Western Conference Finals. Now moving back over to the Eastern Conference, we had That's not Golden State. I'm sorry, y'all. The Cleveland Cavaliers advancing against the Toronto Raptors. Ooh. I'm gonna take Cleveland in 6. I'm not ready to start betting against LeBron just yet. Not against the Raptors anyway. So I'm gonna take them in 6, and now Philadelphia and Milwaukee. Should this matchup come to fruition, hopefully Embiid will be eligible to play or be back playing from his injury, and because of that, I'm going to say this is going to be a 7-game series. I'm going to take Philadelphia to win it in 7. 2 young teams. I'm going to take that. So on the East Coast, or the Eastern Conference, I'm gonna have Philadelphia and Cleveland. In West Coast, we're gonna have the matchup between the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. Okay, now this is where it really gets tough. Do I go against the defending champions, or does Houston, James Harden, Chris Paul finally break through and get to the finals? Yes, they will, but it'll be in 7 games, and I'm taking them to win it in those 7-game series. Alright, so moving back over to the East between Cleveland and Philadelphia. I'm going to go with Cleveland. Cleveland in 6. Okay, so now that we have our final series set, the Houston Rockets taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers for all the marbles, I'm going to say this is the year of the beard and go with Houston in 7. One could only hope a NBA Finals goes to 7 games again. So that's my picks, y'all. I'm rolling the dice, and I'm going to go with Houston to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers for the NBA Finals. So I'm going to save those picks. Now that you've completed your NBA playoff bracket predictions, why don't you share it with your friends? Maybe do that later. But that is... Didn't I get that saved? I want to make sure I save that. Okay. Alrighty. So that's that, y'all. Again, the link to this website in which you can enter your NBA 2018 playoff predictions for a chance to win a grand prize of $1 million is going to be at www.nba.com/playoffs/bracket challenge/#brackets. Remember to get your selections in by 12 p.m. Eastern Time on April 14th, which is Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time and 9 a.m. West Coast Time. This has been Queen Chill Mode. I want to thank you guys again for stopping by my channel. Remember to hit the like button and please subscribe. If you have different opinions on who you think will win, go ahead and hit that. Drop your information in the comments section. Your teams you expect to win, the number of games, and heck, even some reasons as to why. Again, thank you for stopping by my channel. I certainly appreciate the love. Good night, everybody, and God bless you all.